Welcome to Love Bites. Love Bites. Love Bites. Love Bites. By Dr. Tara, your destination for sexual wellness and mindful relationship advice. Hope you're having an orgasmic day.
Seems like Cooper and Billie, number one, their first mistake was lack of sexual communication. Like they didn't talk about sex. And they never had a conversation, or at least it didn't show that they had a conversation about their sexual desires and needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then another mistake is they didn't obviously schedule or plan. I like plan better.
Good correction,
it's like
right?
You plan a vacation.
Right.
Like they didn't plan sex, which they should have, because then Cooper wouldn't be watching sports. He would be trying to get it on with his wife.
Exactly.
What's another mistake? What's the third mistake that you saw them did in the show?
Gosh, well, I think coming back to your first mistake, we should elaborate on that a little bit because, for people who haven't seen the show, he finds her journal and he is like, I think he literally said, like, who the hell are you? I mean, he had no idea that she had a past in which she was so sexually active or liberated. And so while I do not think that people need to or should tell their current partners like details about their past lovers necessarily, I do think it's a good idea when you're entering into a relationship, especially if you're thinking of making a long-term commitment, that you explore and talk about some of the things that you think are important to you sexually, what your preferences are, what your sexual values are. Sex is a really important part of most relationships. And so if you're misaligned or incompatible in that department, it can create bigger relationship issues. And so I do think that that was one of the biggest mistakes that they made.
100%. And with my current husband, the first thing when we started dating, the first thing we did was talking about sex. Just in general, like, how do we feel about it? How important is it for us? What kind of sex do we like? What was life, like sex life, like, before we met each other? And I was the person that probed him because obviously he had no idea. But after, my personal experience, as well as reading all this research that tells you should be having a conversation, I'm like, I'm not going to commit the same mistake again. So I'm going to ask you all these questions. And he loved it. We made it like such a routine where he will like cook me dinner and I will ask him all kinds of questions.
Love it.
He will also like ask me back. So it's like a conversation about sex and it becomes such a big part of our relationship. I remember like one of the first things I told him is I'm very sexually active. And I have a pretty vast like sexual horizon and like variety that I like, and the things that perhaps he has never experienced, but I want to continue to explore. Like, of course we can pause and we can have our like monogamy time where it's just the two of us, where we're really building a solid foundation, because I do believe it takes a little bit time to, well, actually a lot of time to build a solid foundation. However, I did tell him, like, after a while, when we feel comfortable, I want to explore other people again.
I think it's great that you had that conversation. And, to answer your question about what other mistakes that they made, I think that leads us to like the third biggest mistake they made, which was not talking at all about boundaries and limitations when they went to that sex party.
Holy shit. That was so bad. I was like, oh my God, you're going to let your friend take you to a secret place and it's a sex party and you never had a conversation prior. You walked in and then you just started to explore.
Exactly.
Like, that's not how it works.
No. And not only that, they were at a really weak point in their relationship. I mean, there were so many things that went wrong leading up to that horrible experience that they had. And I'm not surprised that the scene ended the way that it did. So I mean, communication is super important.
And setting boundaries, like the green light, yellow light, red light, before you go to a sex party or a swingers party or any kind of like sensual party. Just so you're on the same page. My partner and I talk about like, what's green light? Oh, talking to other people, flirting with them, right? Yellow light, touching them. Yellow light is like basically ask me first.
Right.
Like get a
Check in with
signal that
me.
it's okay first, and then red lights like absolutely not at this party. So they should have had this green, yellow, red light conversation before
Totally.
they went to that sex party. And then she was forced to watch, and another spoiler alert, him getting a blowjob from one of her quote unquote good friends
Yeah.
in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was painful to watch. And, I think what made it so painful is that they were in such a low, dark, confusing place in their own relationship that you can feel that it was just totally overwhelming for both of them. And so I think that's another misconception people have, is the answer to your relationship problems or your sex problems is maybe just to open things up. And that is not the way you want to handle it. It's so important to do whatever you need to do to get your relationship, your primary relationship, in a stable place. To your point, like create a solid foundation, and that can take time before you start exploring. You can think of it as like the seatbelt before you go on a roller coaster. Like you got to make sure you're strapped in, or else you're not going to be able to let go and enjoy the ride.
No. Oh my gosh. And also, yeah, I heard someone, I think it's the couple actually in Texas that owns a swingers club, that said swinging is not going to fix a shitty relationship. It's actually only for people who have a solid, on the same page relationship and want to explore together.
Yes.
It's not like, oh my God, our relationship is such a bad place, let's swing.
Right. You cannot think about
terrible.
it like that.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
So if you're walking on eggshells, if there's a lot of conflict, if there's a lot of bad feelings, if there's a lot of tension, don't try to have group sex, go to a sex party, swingers club, or whatever in that sense, because you are not ready. Absolutely not.
No, I totally agree. So yeah, anyone listening, take notes.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites. Love Bites by Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.